talk about it's the Olympia, I mean, there's some names on this list who didn't make the top 10 and get a chance to hit their routine, like Brandon Curry, who, by the way, had made mention that he actually wasn't that far off from 212, and maybe that's a direction
this is where we got to eat our hats.
Yeah, well, you know what? I mean, originally I thought he can't be that far off. Then I thought to myself, well, maybe he's far enough away that he can't realistically do it. But I think he is that close, and I think now might be a good time for him to, start maybe thinking about going there. Listen, you can get a win, he can qualify for the Olympic, but he's never going to go anything better. Even if he was in great shape, maybe he moves up a spot or two. But honestly, I mean, I tell you what, I'd love to see that physique in there with Flex Lewis and Jose and the crew.
I just don't know. I mean, and here's the thing, and this is where first off, to all the guys watching, I will admit my wrong. I didn't know he was that close. I've stood next to the guy. I was like, no way. I was wrong. I'm not going to eat my hat or my shoes or whatever, but I have no problem admitting I was wrong when I was wrong. When he said, he could make it down there, the only thing that I have an issue with there is I've stood next to all these guys. Right. And these 12 guys are short. Yeah. And while Brandon might be an inch or two shorter than me, he's still, 5'7", 5'8". He's not a 5'6", a 5'5". Jose, this Ash Kanini guy who we'll get to later, who got second, that guy's like 5'2" or 5'3". So, however far Brandon has to peel down. Now, granted, we do know that weight structure, can be very, it can be an illusion, and maybe he could make it to that class and not look like he's lost too much weight. But I mean, I just don't know what kind of physique he's going to have at that light. We forget that 2000, I believe it was 2008, which is 8 years ago already. Brandon got 8th or 9th place at the Olympia. So for me, when he talks about dropping to the 212, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Well, the bottom line for me is Brandon is not showing up in shape. Period. I like the guy. Right. Brandon, I like you a lot. Nice guy. Always a great guy to be around at the shows. He's not putting in the work. Period. He might not want to hear that. Might tell me I'm a dick the next time he sees him. Whatever. This is not a guy who, to me, should be dropping to 212. This is a guy who should be putting in more work where he's at, and there's no reason why he can't be, doing better. He's already winning shows coming in off. I mean, this is a guy who's placed top 10 at the Olympia a handful of years ago and has not made any progress since. Now, I know he's a father of 4, and there's a lot to be said for balance and lifestyle. Sure. You know what? Maybe it's a good thing he's not killing himself because he's got other things that are important in his life. But from a competitive standpoint, if I'm pushing all that aside, I don't want to see Brandon drop to the 212. I want to see him step his game up in the open.
Well, we'll keep that in mind, obviously, as we get to this next year. I'll be curious to see what he does, but you got some good valid points here, David, as to pros and cons, whether he stays or whether he goes. Either way, I think he's still got a good few years coming to him in the IFBB. We got to move on, David, as we're running out of time as it is.
Yeah, one more name in the open, Nathan Dash.
Nathan, right?
His first Olympia debut, or his first Olympia debut. That's a little bit redundant. His first Olympia.
Yeah, it is.
A lot of talk about Nathan kind of getting hosed on the boards, and I'm not going to necessarily argue with that, but I don't agree with it because I feel like you could take maybe Josh and Justin and Nathan, throw them in a comparison, have some people flip-flop them. Sure. But like we said, somebody's got to place 9th, somebody's got to place 10th, somebody's got to place 11th, somebody's got to place 12th. So I sympathize with the guys on the boards saying Nation should have been in that top 10, but I think you can make an argument one way or the other. But this is a guy who just turned pro not that long ago, got second, third, won a show. I mean, so he's doing awesome. And again, please keep in mind, guys, this is the Olympia. It is the best of the best of the best. So, for Nathan to show up and look the way he did and even be there this earlier in his career, it was awesome.
The best of the best of the best is 3. If you add 2 more into that, you got Flex Lewis, who came out on top again at the 212. Every year he wins, Phil wins. So it's a good luck charm for Phil every time Flex is crowned the champ. But he had some competition this year. Not that he hasn't in the past, but he was a little more dominant, I think, the last year or two. And he got pushed all the way. Listen, Flex was phenomenal. Looked as good as Flex always does. Nothing more to be said there. He came. He did his homework. He does put that work in. And he obviously takes it very serious. No, he doesn't intend on going anywhere, guys. Quit asking him. He's the best in the world 5 times over. I highly suggest you stay where you are on top of your game. Is the best in the world. Kind of hard to walk away from that, David. But I want to get to the new guy, man. Ahmad Ashkenani, I tell you, this guy was a fire plug, man. He had some muscle.
Yeah, he's got a ton of muscle on a small frame. His back, I mean, they say shows are won from the back. His back is a mile wide. I think he's a little bit top heavy, but he's a new guy. I don't even think he's been a pro that long. Didn't he just turn pro at the end of last year?
He was an amateur at the beginning of the year. That's how far. And that's also, by the way, why he won Rookie of the Year at the IFBB Awards at the banquet afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, this guy looked. And he's another one of these guys that has a freak factor. I mean, Flex Lewis. And I almost felt a little bad over the weekend when I kind of went back and looked at my critiques of Flex, because I think we're so used to seeing him so good that it's here's Flex again. He won again. Let's focus on the other guys. I agree. I don't know that Flex was quite as good this year as he has been in the past. Maybe maybe it's like a 1% conditioning thing. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the freakiest guy. He's not the most shredded, but it's a total package contest: size, symmetry, conditioning, proportions. And Flex Lewis is the best of all those put together. So I think he was a clear win for me. But Ashkenani was, man, that guy, he's good. I was a little bit surprised to see him ahead of Jose, because I feel like Jose is a little bit more complete. We did see a little bit of a downsize in Jose's leg that he's had surgery on, but I think top to bottom, Jose was a little bit more complete than Ashkenani, but Ashkenani did have a couple shots where, maybe he had a little bit more of a freak factor, which is hard to say because Jose is, about as freaky as they come. But it was. I mean, for him to have been sitting on an amateur stage earlier on this year and getting second at the Olympia behind a guy who's a 5-time champion, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I thought Jose was Jose. I mean, that's exactly what I expect out of him. He showed up in shape. He's veiny. He's hard. He's got a lot of muscle on that frame. He's been training a lot of years. And he was definitely in contention. Could you have made a case for him for second? Sure. But Ashkenani was so good. And you're right. Yeah, his legs need to come up a little bit. And I mean a little bit, not a whole lot. Right. If I was Flex Lewis, I'd be looking over my shoulder next year. He's got him coming from all directions, man. Some of these names that didn't make the top 5 was amazing when I was calling them out. And I'm looking at Charles Dixon. I'm looking at Hidetani Yamagishi. I'm looking at Guy Cisternino. David Henry.
Well, David Henry was in the top.
I take that. I meant
Mark Dugdale was outside.
Dugdale and those guys. David Henry, though, I'm glad you mentioned. I thought he looked phenomenal.
Yeah.
When he came out, man, I was like, wow, man, David really brought it this show. And I thought, honestly, he'd be contending for the top spot, but he ended up in 5th.
Yeah, aside from Rulli, David Henry, to me, had some of the biggest freak factor effect of the whole show. I mean, his upper body, front to back, was just incredible. And his legs, his legs are downsized, but he looks like he might have brought them up a little bit.
I thought they were pretty decent.
Yeah, they were. I think, there were some boos when David was in 5th. I definitely had David ahead of Eduardo in 4th. I don't think Eduardo was at his best at all. I think conditioning, he was off his best. And again, Eduardo is one of those guys who's like got one foot in the grave conditioning normally. So to say Eduardo's off his best, he's still in good shape. But David, I could have had David Henry as high as second, because to me, when I look at Ahmad Ashkenani's upper body and the amount of mass he has, I don't know that he has that much more, if more mass than David, but I think David's upper body is much more refined than Ahmad's. So I think realistically, I would have had Eduardo at the bottom of that top 5, but I think you could have taken David Henry, Jose, and Ahmad and kind of flip flopped them around a little bit, and I would have been okay with that. It's like we talk about so much. It's an apples and oranges and everything in between. But the 212, like you said, man, there were some guys. I mean, Hidetani won the Arnold earlier on in the year.
And he didn't make the cut.
He's not in the top 5.
Yeah.
So Mark Dugdale was at his all-time best, which was great to see at the Olympia.
Sammy Al Haddad in there, Sean Clarita. Like I say, Charles the Tank, Charles Dixon.
Yes, you got a lot of these guys. I talked to Charles Dixon for a little bit.
Ronnie Rockel was in there.
Yeah, Charles seemed cool with. He's like, I was outside the top 5, but he's like, yeah, shit, I'm at the Olympia, so it's what it is. So Charles Dixon might have been one of the guys who was like, yeah, I'm cool with it. So, but yeah, the 212 was super competitive, and it's good to see those guys really brought it again, like they always do.
Well, bottom line is James Lewis ends up with number 5. He's as dominant in his class as Phil Heath is in the Open to his. So congratulations, obviously, to both those guys. For those on the boards that like to ask this week, as this always comes up every single year now, the 212 Olympia, okay? We dropped the showdown title from that. It's now called the 212 Olympia. It's no longer a 212 showdown. That said, this is not a Mr. title. Okay, the title of Mr. Olympia is given to the people that compete for the Mr. Olympia. Phil Heath is Mr. Olympia. Flex Lewis is the 212 Olympia champion. Now look we can call him 212 Mr. Olympia off the books, not officially, whatever. It doesn't really matter what you call him. But officially, that is not a title. And no, they don't compete against each other. They're two different divisions. All right, so they're not two different classes within the same division. So I just want to make this clear because people keep asking me, well, I don't understand. How come he isn't? How come he doesn't get a Sandow? It's like because the Sandow is given to the Mr. Olympia.
It's the Open. Now, if he wanted to get a Sandow,
go to the Open. Beat Phil Heath.
He could go to the Open and he could compete for one.
Sure.
So
listen, for the record, he could do that. Now, he would have to qualify to do that. Okay? You can't just pop in there because it isn't a different division. Now, could he qualify for that? Absolutely no question in my mind. Would he contend with Phil Heath for the title? Absolutely not. Listen, with all due respect to Flex Lewis, you're going to see that difference. And we've talked about this in the past. I always reflect back to that first Olympia when it was the 202 or the 210, whichever it was at the time. David Henry won the show, and Kevin English, I believe, was second. And both guys that year, the first year, were allowed to cross over to the Open. They both competed in the Open. They took last and dead last.
It's just frame wise. I don't look. Flex Lewis is a great champion. He's as good of a guy as you're going to find. I mean, you really can't say enough about the guy. But if we're talking analyst talk and we're talking about physiques, some guys talk, could he be top 6? I mean, I look at and this is, God, please don't take this as any disrespect because this is purely analytical. But from a structure standpoint, I don't know that he honestly makes top 10 or top 12. To me, and again, like I said, I almost hate to say that because I have as much respect for Flex as I do any competitor in this industry, as a competitor and as a person. But I just don't, I don't see it, because I start looking at these guys in the top 10 and like, ugh, and you never know until you see them standing next to each other. But how is a 212-pound Flex Lewis going to look next to, let's talk 10th place Justin Compton?
Well,
I'm sorry, Justin Compton's arms are significantly bigger than Flex's. His quads maybe aren't as well shaped, but they're going to be bigger. If you're talking they start hitting lat spreads inside chest, Compton's dwarfing Flex Lewis. And it's and we talk about guys like, Lee Priest competed in the Open and Sean Ray competed in the Open. And I just, it was a different time. And when you're talking Lee Priest and Sean Ray, you're talking guys who are just on a different level. Not to say that Flex Lewis isn't, but if I have to put Sean Ray next to Flex Lewis, I'm picking Sean every time.
Well, here's the bottom line, David. Take Flex Lewis out in that lineup, and you put him between Big Country and Big Ramy, and that's going to tell you a whole lot right there. Listen, like I say, David Henry and Kevin English. Now, this is Kevin English in the early days, not the later days when he was a little beat up and all that. He was damn good. He was impressive. He was muscular, man. People say, "Holy crap, man! Look at David Henry was tremendous." That's David Henry again in the old days, where again he had the legs to match that upper body. Those guys, respectfully, I say this, were last and second last in the Open in the same show the next night. Now that told me everything I needed to know as to why they shouldn't be crossing over. Number one, two, you kind of got to know where you fit in there. There's a reason we created this division. And it's that you can stand on there with other guys that are about the same weight, give or take. But you've got a limit there. You're going to stand in next to freaking Dallas and Big Ramy and Cedric and these guys. These guys are monsters. Yeah. They're monsters. You're going to look like a middleweight out there is what's going to end up happening.
It's like I said. It's not. It's nothing against these guys. I mean, you're talking about this is the height and the structure you were born with. This is not a knock. This is not a diss. To any of these guys, they're training their work ethic. This is the structure you were born with. That's like putting, me in a slam dunk contest with Shaq. I'm 5'10". My
Right.
fat ass is going to be lucky if I can, get up to the rim versus somebody taller. Does that, I mean, that's just how you're born. And so it's no disrespect, but you just, Flex Lewis staying in the 212, that's where he needs to be. That's where he belongs. And he's a champion there. He's doing good there. He's dominating there. There's no reason for him to cross over into the open.
All right, David. Well, that's going to conclude the men's end, the 212. We got a couple other classes we're going to kind of breeze through because we're going to run like we'll split this into two parts for you guys out there. It's because I know there's a lot to talk about, man. There's a lot to cover.
That's the Olympia, a lot to talk about. So
Classic Physique made its debut on the Olympia stage this year. 17 competitors, and it was loaded up pretty nice. Some damn good competitors out there. Danny Hester is not a name a lot of people were going to pick out of that. I've known Danny personally.
I picked Danny.
Danny, I've known Danny literally since the 80s. That's how far we go back. He's 47. He's going to be 48 years old in another month or two. Beautiful physique. Always had a beautiful physique. When he came back and got his pro card just a couple years ago, he had a beautiful physique, and obviously it got him to the winner's circle here. Listen, he had some good competition. And there was a lot of moving around, boy, from those judges for this class in particular. Because he had Breon Ansley next to him. He had Durham Charles next to him. He had Sadiq next to him. He had Arash next to him, who, by the way, was my pick. I love Danny Hester. He's my boy. I had Arash winning this one. Just a beautiful physique, man. Good-looking guy. Put together well. Almost cut his toe off in half, by the way. Backstage...
dropped Juliana's trophy.
Yeah, his girlfriend, Juliana, who won the Women's Physique Olympia for the third time. Congratulations. He was holding the trophy up, and it was in a box. And it I don't know if it was upside down or whatever, but it ended up slipping through the box, went straight down. Now, he's got sandals on. He's backstage. They got nothing but shorts on, and smashed it. I heard it from the stage. I actually heard the crash and look because it sounded like a chandelier fell on the ground. And I was like, wow, that can't be good. And it wasn't good. It hit right on his big toe, almost cut it in half.
Severed his toe, yeah.
Yeah, hit a major artery. He was bleeding. There was blood all over the place back there. The poor guy. He ended up going to the emergency. They stitched him up, and he came back, actually. He got a laugh at it, actually, at the seminar we did. So it was good that he was a good sport about it. But physique-wise, I mean, thank God it happened after the show, not before.
Yeah.
I thought he was great, man. I mean, he was great. And Breon Ansley, actually, I tell you, I could have made a case for either one of those guys winning this thing.
Yeah, I picked Danny as my early pick, and I broke a little bit of media rules this weekend at the Olympia. Bob, you've been around. There's this whole no cheering from the press pit, and basically what no cheering from the press pit is, if you're there doing media, there shouldn't be any bias, there shouldn't be any cheering, and I think it's not a written rule anywhere. It's just kind of a and not everybody goes by it. We see a lot of we see a lot of the foreign media outlets yelling and screaming, but generally the American guys, we kind of keep it quiet, just to show professionalism stuff. I was cheering for Danny. I mean, I tell you what, I remember seeing Danny on ESPN, American Muscle, back in the early '90s and stuff. I've been a big fan of his. I was super excited when he brought his pro card at Nationals a couple years ago. He was never going to be a guy doing a lot of damage in the 212 because he was too small. And so when Classic Physique came around and he entered that, I thought from the get-go, this is a guy who can do really well. Now, the same discussion we have about Flex Lewis winning the 212 is the same discussion I'm going to have about Danny winning the Classic. Not necessarily the most shredded, not necessarily whatever, but to me, when we talk about Classic Physique, and it's a term, it's about structure and flow and everything like that. To me, Danny had the most classic physique on that stage. If it was a bodybuilding competition, just like let's say we take all those same guys,
Breon Ansley wins
competition. Yeah, easily, and I probably would have had Breon in second place ahead of Arash. But to me, Danny had the most classic physique. He fits the division. It was really nice to see him. Breon looked really good. I felt he was a little overlooked in fourth. Arash has a really pretty physique, so I wouldn't have necessarily had him in second, but I have no issues with him being in second. Sadiq being in third, I was a little.
I gotta be honest, bro. I ain't got him that high.
No, he's got an incredibly small and an incredibly ripped midsection. And it's and you didn't know how I don't know how somebody's midsection, all bodybuilders, physique athletes, we get lean disproportionately as far as our
Sure.
body parts. Somebody's got this that comes in faster, somebody's got that. Sadiq's midsection looks like he's at 2% body fat.
Right.
And and God, he's probably going to shoot me for this. I think my quads are probably as lean as Sadiq's are right now.
Yeah, it's a big disparity between
his quads had, and mind you, my midsection is 100 times fatter than his right now, but his quads had almost no detail at all. And that's an issue for me. Now, structurally, if I'm going to make an argument why he placed the way he did, structurally, he flows real well. He's got a tiny waist. His quads have really good shape, so I'll give him that. His quads have good shape. He's got a nice teardrop, a pretty decent sweep, so they have good shape. There just wasn't any detail, and there was a couple of guys that placed behind him. Breon. I mean, that I wouldn't have had him as high as he did. The thing is the weird thing about physique is, some of these guys just don't look right standing next to each other because of the height discrepancy
right.
in the you got Robert Timms.
Yeah, I was going to say, you got Robert Timms, and by the way, shout out to Robert Timms. He's a Dennis James disciple, but the reason I give him a shout out, he is probably one of the nicest guys I've ever met. He's active military, where he serves in the Air Force, and he does that now. I mean, that's what he does. So for him, he's 100% natural. Doesn't take anything. No, I mean, he doesn't even take regular stuff like supplements. And like I say, active military on the Olympia stage. He looked phenomenal. Ends up in 6. But you're right. Between Robert Timms at 6'4" or whatever he is, and Terrence Ruffin, who's 5 foot tall. But let me tell you, that guy's put together.
Yeah, a lot of talk about Terrence. And here's my piece of analysis. If this competition was you have one by one, they walk out, and you see them individually, and you have to judge who's got the best physique individually, and we're not comparing them. To me, Terrence Ruffin wins. I think if you show it, here's an unfair look. Terrence looked absolutely fantastic. He was in great shape. Structurally, he's nearly flawless.
Yep.
Except for that he's tiny.
Right.
I mean, and so there's people posting comparison pictures of Terrence next to some other guys, and in those comparison pictures, if they're not sized, fair sizing, I mean, to me, Terrence by himself, he beats everybody. Now, if you take Terrence's physique and you say, oh, hey, this guy's 5'10" and weighs 220, he's beating half the guys in the open. I mean, Terrence's structure and his conditioning and everything else is phenomenal. This guy looks amazing, but he's tiny. And there's no two ways about it. He is tiny. And the best comparison I can make is you guys have seen Sean Clarita on stage plenty of times, okay? And you see how Sean Clarita looks next to other bodybuilders. That's how Terrence looked next to these classic guys. Again, Terrence has a phenomenal physique, conditioning, aesthetics, his flow. I mean,
Sure.
this guy looks like a statue.
Well,
I mean,
let me tell you something, David. Terrence is so small that he actually models for trophy tops. It's unbelievable.
That was the same joke you had from Marvin Ward 3 years ago.
You know what? I can't get nothing
You
right.
think I'm gonna forget that?
Yeah.
No, but so like I said, if you take a picture if you have to judge just by pictures or guys standing alone, Terrence Ruffin's your winner. Then again, if you have to take pictures of guys standing alone, Terrence Ruffin could be your 212 champ. Terrence,
Yeah, he could be Mr. Olympia.
You take Terrence Ruffin's physique and you scale him to size of Phil Heath, and Terrence Ruffin wins.
Yeah,
Okay,
he's
Terrence
Mr. Olympia.
is that flawless, but he's tiny, and that's that. Like I said,
Wow.
Terrence Ruffin's 5'10", 240. He's your Olympia champion.
Well, Durham Charles had a hell of a year and pretty much competed in every show that was out there. Won a good portion of them. Ends up flip-flopped here. I thought I couldn't really put him another spot, maybe another spot higher, but Durham looked good, But listen, Durham's done fantastic for what he brings to the table and all that. Being a former competitive bodybuilder, like everybody else, I'm sure he was pissed off and probably thought he should have won. But I thought Durham looked great.
He's got slight quads. I mean, that's that. At the end of the day, that was Durham's problem as a pro, and I've said this a million times, and I'll say it again. He was more classical, structure-wise, as a bodybuilder because he had fuller quads. And everybody when they try to slim out, you hope that the weight comes off everywhere. I don't know that Darren's upper body right now is any smaller than it was when he was a pro bodybuilder, but his legs are, and so he doesn't have the same aesthetics. He doesn't have the same flow as some of the open guys, or excuse me, as some of the other guys in the classic. But I think the guy that I was probably most impressed with that I hadn't seen before was Breon Ashley. He qualified at a show that we weren't at, so this is my first time seeing him in person. And despite me picking Danny for the win, I would have had no issues whatsoever with Breon winning. I thought he looked fantastic. I thought he was an easy second place. But I'm sure he'll be moving up, in the future, moving forward.
Oh yeah, you'll see him in the winner's circle and back at that Olympia stage, I'm sure. Moving on with men's physique, Jeremy Buendia makes it 3 in a row, successfully defends a very, very talented lineup there, and man, they were moving those guys all over the place as well. Everybody got, in all the classes, like you mentioned earlier, David, they got what they deserved. I mean, they got, you want to come to the Olympia?
The men's physique guys were moved all over. I mean, I was trying to follow. I'm like, okay, Ryan Terry's going to be the winner. Oh, Jeremy Potvin's the winner. Oh, Brandon Hendrickson's the winner. Like, oh no. I mean, they had Buendia all the way to the outside.
Oh, yeah. And I asked you,
he wasn't posing right. Jeremy's obliques are like his stand. All he's got to do, like when Jeremy stands straight on, he's got a waist that's this big, but his midsection looks good. If he twists like this much, everything just pops and he looks great. And he just, I don't know if he just froze up on stage or what, but he just wasn't posing right. And halfway into the prejudging, Hani Rambod walks up and he's next. Hani's screaming because Jeremy wasn't doing his thing. So if anybody saw, what we were talking about in call-outs, like, okay, Jeremy's on the outside and now he's in the middle in first place. You think it's just like going through the motions for posing. Jeremy's posing was really bad to begin with, and it was killing him. And then he finally got his act together and started moving his way to the middle. But to think that much work and that much dieting and everything, and then to have his posing be off by a quarter twist to where his midsection is popping would have lost him the title is crazy. It goes to, you got to pay attention to detail. But a good win for Jeremy, number 3.
It was that close, and he was going from like first to 6 with every move and then back again. So it was interesting to watch his face as he'd get in the middle and big smile and confident, and then they put him to the outside and it looked like somebody just kicked his dog. So the Fitness Olympia, Oksana Grashina, listen, we can't even talk anymore about what she's brought up.
She did her MJ routine.
That's right. She did her Michael Jackson routine. You're wearing that, of course, in support of Oksana. I know that's what you were thinking. She's just a head and shoulders above the rest, bro. I mean, honestly, she's just so good, so inventive, so she's outstanding.
She's just hands down the best performer, and this is no disrespect to Adela or Jenny Lynn or whoever came before her. She is hands down the best performer the IFBB has ever seen. And without trying to make too many predictions, because you never know who's going to come around next, you're going to be hard pressed to ever see a better performer. I mean, she's just.
I say she stays as long as she wants until she gets bored with it or finds something, or Cirque du Soleil comes calling and gives her a job. But she's that good, and she could go 10 years in a row if she wanted to, in my opinion.
And every time, the thing is, every time you see one of her routines, you're like I remember seeing her Joker routine, which was just intense.
Right.
It was almost a little bit dark, and then you're like, well, it's not going to get any better than that. And then she comes out with the flash dance hot for teacher routine. You're like, holy shit, it doesn't get any better than that. And then she comes out with the Black Swan routine.
Swan, yeah.
And it's just super dramatic again. And you're like, well, that's as good as it gets. And then at the Arnold this year, she comes out with the MJ routine. And anybody who's been to a local level show or a national level show or whatever, we've all seen people at some point or another do horrendous MJ move.
Yeah, we've seen some pretty bad,
including myself. I had a little bit of fun to Smooth Criminal at the Mr. Wisconsin in 2003. I didn't try to pull off too many MJ moves. I knew my limitations, but she nails them. I mean, she comes out and those aren't easy dance moves to recreate. So, best of all time, hands down winner, no questions asked.
Well, women's figure, Latoya Watts defends the title. I didn't see that one coming, actually. I mean, that was a tough one. You had Nicole Wilkins coming back, who ended up in 4th place. But you had I mean, there's a whole. I'm looking down the list. I mean, you got Swan De La Rosa. You had Candice Lewis, Camila Rodriguez. I mean, you had some of the top names in there that have been in there. So this thing was loaded up. Sydney Gillen was outstanding. I thought she was in the mix. I could have had literally any one of those three winning. I could have had Sydney. I could have had Candice, and I could have had Latoya. I actually had Candice winning the show. Latoya was good. I thought Candice just flows a little bit better. But when it came out, Latoya's in the winner's circle again.
Yeah, Candice and Latoya have similar structures as far as taper goes. Wide, small, good sweep. And I guess if I had to try to explain to somebody the difference between the two, Candice has a little bit softer transitions from one body part to the next, if that makes any sense. She's got broad shoulders, a really nice V-taper, really nice quads. Latoya is just a little bit more muscle. There's a little bit more of a sharpness, or her lower lats dive into her back a little bit more aggressively, I guess you could say, than Candice's. But yeah, I mean, if you would have flip-flopped those two, I'd be okay with that. For me, it was a good win for Latoya. And, Latoya is just one of those girls, and, no disrespect to her at all, but her structure is just, it just comes down to genetics. I mean, you could have a million people do the exact same diet, the exact same supplements, the exact same training routine, and, 1 in a million people is going to have the shoulder to waist to quad ratio that Latoya has, and who knows how long she can be champion,
Well, new bikini champion was crowned, David. Bet you didn't see that one coming.
No, I saw some pictures of her from Phoenix, and I thought she looked really good. She's been, a top placer in the Olympia. I know Ashley's had a lot of big career stuff going on. She moved out to LA. For those of you who don't follow Ashley on social media, she has had as busy of a travel schedule as I think any of the IFBB pros. Period. So she's doing the business of bodybuilding as much as anybody is, and we've heard of bodybuilders say, hey, I had to shut down the travel 6 or 12 weeks before the show, and I think Ashley's been really trying to take advantage of the fact that she was a 3-time champion, and get out there. I couldn't even tell you how many times she was in Europe. It seemed like on Facebook every other day she's like, hop in a plane to go to Finland, to England, whatever. And I think Ashley needed to step back a little bit and focus a little bit more on the competitive side of it, and I think she realizes that too. She just wasn't at her best. It's not like all of a sudden Ashley's physique isn't where she needed to be. Janet Leigh was, look, guys bring it up on the boards. How hot is Janet in person? Yeah. What did Bob say? Disco fever. Janet is about as attractive as a human being can possibly get. I mean, if you had to fucking... That's so excited I get. I'm like losing myself. If you had to look up flawless in a dictionary, it's like, here's Janet. But she was a little bit soft, which some people prefer. But for that stage, she was a little bit too soft. She's a little bit softer from the back than she is the front, which hurts her a little bit. Courtney looked really good, and she looked really good in Phoenix. And sometimes, maybe having a win a week before the Olympia, it's like, okay, wow, she's, she really gets put on the radar. She's done really well at the Arnold and the Olympia the last couple of years, so she's somebody that's, looking to be in the first call out. But look, these girls all look so good, and the guys on the boards talk all the time. Well, how do they pick, and how do they pick? And it's, what, guys, it's not easy. I did a thing at the Nationals a couple years ago. The guys were complaining about there being so much ambiguity. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll pick, who my first call-out is in this class just to prove, like, there's some consistency. Sure. And out of, like, the first 7 in the first call-out, I had picked 4 of them. So you can out of like 40 girls. So it's like, yeah, you can look and you can pick. But, I mean, this is a division where so many of the girls look so good, and it's not like bodybuilding where there's this giant discrepancy in size, conditioning, and structure. So it is really nitpicky. And could you take a couple of the top girls and flip-flop them, and people would still be happy? Yes. Could you take 10th through 15th and flip-flop them? Yes. But, it was a good win for Courtney. She had a really good physique, a tiny waist, a lean midsection, and, and it was a fair win for her.
So more than a few people could have had Angelica Teixeira in there as well. Absolutely outstanding.
Jennifer Ronziti, your winner from Tampa and Toronto and Baltimore, looked fantastic. I wouldn't have had any problem with Jennifer winning. I mean,
I ordered the Ronzitis at the cafe over there. Excellent dish. The Last class, women's physique. Juliana makes it a three-peat. You got your three-peat. Um, she's just phenomenal, bro. I mean, honestly, she's just so put together. But I tell you what, she actually had some good competition this year. I thought it was going to be one of those. I don't know if anybody's really going to contend. Tycee called it a day. You know, she's out of the mix. You know, you got into kind of your next crew, which again, nothing against them. I mean, because you had a very good Autumn Swanson. You had Kira Newman, runner up from last year. So, but Danny Reardon, the little monster, that chick is put together. Man, she's put together. I tell you what, she ain't far behind Juliana.
No, not at all. And in fact, had Danny won, I'd have been perfectly okay with that. I mean, Danny's one of these girls where she was competing for a handful of years and just not coming in quite sharp enough. She gets with a new coach, AJ Sims, and they really dial in her conditioning. And all of a sudden, boom, she's right at the top. 4th place last year, and even last year, you could have made an argument for her. I think for 3rd place ahead of Tycee. Kira last year was a solid 2nd place. But when we talk about Juliana, it's the same talk as Flex and Danny and everything. Juliana wasn't the leanest girl there. She's not the most muscular, but to me, she's the best balanced and has the best overall physique, and that's what's winning her the title. And she knows this too. I talked to Juliana before we did an interview. I talked to we talked to all these people a little bit off camera before the interview start rolling, and she just said, "Look, I'm trying to make small improvements in myself. I'm not trying to show up super shredded. I'm not trying to be the biggest version." And women's physique is a tough division for these girls to train for because they're trying not to be too shredded, but you got somebody like Autumn Swanson winning the Arnold, like super peeled, and you get some of the girls coming in a little bit bigger, and and the placings can be tough. But Juliana was just the best combination of everything. I was a little bit disappointed. Autumn Swanson came in a little bit off her conditioning. She a good win at the Arnold, 5th place last year, was outside of the top 5 this year. I know she was disappointed, but she's somebody who'll bounce back. Kira wasn't as good as she was last year. Obviously still a top finish at the Olympia is something that she deserves all the respect in the world for. But she was a little bit off her best. It was a good win for Juliana, but she sure has Danny on her tail.
Absolutely. All right, David. Well, that's going to wrap it up for another Olympia. What a great weekend it was. Again, congratulations again to everybody over at AMI, of course, and Robin Chang, who put together just an outstanding production from start to finish.
I would like to, I don't know if he's going to catch this. Well, first off, yes, guys, Bob is still with MD. Bob has been working. Bob has been working for Flex in the Olympia. I think you were working with Flex in the Olympia before you started with MD, right?
Yeah, since my first Olympia.
Bob's with Flex now. It's like
2004 with Triple H.
Yeah, I started for the Olympia. So we lose you, Bob, for the Olympia weekend. But
I'm all over the place.
But no, I just Robin Chang. This is my first year as the online editor, so obviously a lot of pressure for me coming in, trying to coordinate all the coverage, press passes, media, this, that, this. My head's spinning 100 miles an hour, and for me to be a new guy in this industry, and to have the promoter of the Olympia, he's like got the promoter of the Mr. Olympia, be as cool as he is. To me, like trying to get this organized, I'm like a fish out of water. I mean, for me, it really says a lot about Robin's professionalism. And, he knows MD is trying to bring the best coverage that we can to the fans. So, look, guys, this is a business. And at the end of the day, if AMI and Flex wanted to say MD was competition, simple as that. We're not there. But, they're doing what's best for the sport. And like I said, I can't say enough for how helpful Robin is. This is a guy who's as busy as can be, and there was a couple questions I had, a couple things I needed. I'm sending Robin text messages, and this is like, okay, am I going to hear back from him in 2 or 3 days? I send Robin a text message. I get a response in 2-3 minutes from a guy who's busy promoting the Olympia. And so, this might look, actually, I don't even give a shit what it looks like to anybody else. This might look like a big ass kissing session, but it's not. It's a me as a new professional in this industry getting as much respect, and I say respect because that's what it was, from somebody in Robin's position. It meant a lot to me, and it helps out muscular development, and it helps out all the fans. You guys question sometimes, whether we're doing the best that we can to bring you the best coverage. Trust me, we are. Do I want this to be on NBC, and the Olympia will be on CBS next year? So another note, The Rock came out and said it's going to be on CBS, but but yeah, guys, Flax, CMI, MD, we're all doing the best that we can to bring you guys the best coverage. And for the folks at AMI and Flax and Robin Chang to the professionalism he showed our crew at MD this weekend says a lot about how much they care for the fans and the exposure for the athletes. And so a big thank you to me for Olympia LLC, Robin Chang, AMI, and all that. So.
Absolutely. Well said, David. All right, well, that's going to wrap things up here. We'll be back. Lots of stuff coming up. We got the Arnold Spain coming up this week. Prague is in a couple of weeks. Kuwait is on the boards. Actually, I might be heading there myself. So there's a whole bunch of bodybuilding still coming up this year. So don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be on the boards, of course, all throughout the week here, catching up with you guys on all the Olympia stuff and answer some of those conspiracy theories, which I'm sure are abounding by now. All right, David, thanks for coming by with that report. For David Bay, I'm Bob Chick. We're out.